The lie has prevented many people in the world from understanding that Ukraine is today carrying out precisely the main task of European civilization, to unite cultural essences of various types. The Euromaidan accomplished that task, and the united Ukrainian political nation appeared. It is high time for the world to question the validity of the phrase, "Can any good thing come out of Ukraine?" and to instead reflect on Adam Michnik's formula, what happened in Kiev at the Euromaidan was the most majestic moment of manifestation of the senses of European values. National identity. Hundreds of thousands of academic scholars were raised at the world's universities on the model of Russia as a core nation, in Huntington terms, of the Orthodox civilization. Everything seemed to support that concept. The grandeur of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, the military power, the glory of Russian literature, and the beauty of its Onion church domes. Ukrainians looked like poor relatives who tried to sue for their own historical heritage against the powerful and worldwide recognized magnate. However, it was those underestimated Ukrainians who revealed their European nature on both Maidans, while the highly respected magnate has broken the ties with Europe and now threatens the world with a nuclear battle. As the same Adam Michnik put it, Putin's policy went too far. This is already the destruction of the European world order, making harm to all the values of European democracy, unquote. In addition, it became visible that the small and weak Ukraine is able to move away from Russia, while the seemingly core state itself fails to exist without the so-called unimportant Ukrainian nation. The reason is explained by the Russians themselves. According to Lilia Shevtsova, I quote, "Without Ukraine, it will be very difficult to prove the legitimacy of both Russian Orthodoxy and the Russian state claims of being originated with the Kievan Rus. Ukraine, while going away to the West, is taking the legitimacy of the Russian state with itself, and we stay as Moscovia, inhabited with we don't know whom. Russia would have to start its history not from the millennium-long history of Christianity and the baptism of Rus, but from Prince Andrei Bogolubsky, that is from the 12th century. But this is quite different history, unquote. So the world may decode one more historical fake, which was invented by Peter I and Catherine II, serving the needs of the newly emerging Russian Empire. And this would mean the decoding of one of the biggest falsifications of human history, which has heavily undermined the ability of the world to understand what is actually going on in this part of the world. Thus, for many Westerners, the Russian attempt to bring disobedient Ukrainian sheep back to the fold seems more realistic and historically justified than the reorganization of the Eastern European space on a non-imperial and non-Moscow platform. Let me give you another perspective. We all remember the famous metaphor by St. John Paul II of Europe breathing with two lungs, the metaphor belonging to the icons of the European project. The Western lung is perfectly defined within its history. But who represents the Eastern one? For many people in the world, the Eastern lung may be only the Russian world. It is this conviction that makes the world's churches, including the Vatican, catch at the last remnants of dialogue with the Russian Orthodox Church, in spite of this church's pride of non-compliance and the eternal stand of Third Rome antagonism. The degradation of the spiritual heritage of Christianity in modern Russia is so all-embracing that it would mean calcification of the Eastern lung rather than its revival. However, the inertia of this pro-Russian fascination leaves unnoticed the fact that it is a true layer of ancient Christian civilization of Kiev that is emerging from under a concrete slab of despotic dominance. The manifestation of authentic spirituality on the Maidan in Kiev, along with people's yearning for spiritual values throughout the country, were magnificent. Kiev's Independence Square, the Maidan, was a place of daily prayers, night vigils, the conversions to faith. The Maidan was a site of ecumenism and interreligious cooperation on human dignity. That is, there was a public consensus of all Ukrainian Christians, Jews, and Muslims. There is now incredible volunteer work being done to help numerous refugees, the wounded, and the traumatized. I agree with Bogdan Havrilishin that they did it out of a sense of obligation towards their fellow countrymen and their country. This is the phenomenon that is clearly able to enrich European civilization. What is needed, one might say, is a midwife's assistance for this tiny flesh of a different, though dialogical and value-based Christian platform being born in pain. It would be too early to label it as the Eastern lung. In general, the regeneration of the Eastern lung appears to be a difficult process. However, we would be glad if the West would respect and appreciate the openness of the dialogical nature of this newly emerging platform. This is the authentic spirit of the Christian Kiev that has been so long hidden under the shadow of Imperial Moscow. Freedom. Both Ukrainian Maidans demonstrated quite spectacularly what freedom means for Ukrainians. It is still being demonstrated now at the theater of war in the east of Ukraine. For the first time in 500 years, we have a real chance to liberate ourselves from the noose of the false brotherhood. For the first time after independence, the new generation was born, which cannot be labeled as Homo Sovieticus anymore. But what does our freedom mean for the rest of the world? First, the liberation of Ukraine signifies that the post-Yalta status quo, according to which Ukraine must remain under Russian control, is outdated. Actually, this is one of the main messages revealed by Putin's action. And too many people in the world are ready to suggest it would be much safer for the whole community to make concessions to Russia and force Ukraine to accept the deal. However, the conflict of Russia with the West will not be solved even if Ukraine is back in the Russian orbit. The bear has been awakened already, and the spirit of Stalin is calling Putin to take revenge on a global scale. What is ignored here is the wisdom that history matters, as Myroslav Marynovych told, but doesn't dictate. History shapes our behavior, but does not and should not predetermine our future. It is not only Ukrainians who have to believe that we are not hostages of our failures. It's also people in the wider world who have to understand fear is a legitimate warning, but a questionable advisor. Quoting wartime US President Franklin Roosevelt, Herman Van Rompuy, the President of the European Council, recently said that the biggest enemy of Europe today is fear, and that this ultimately could lead to war. And I agree with him, even if he interprets that in a different way. In conclusion, the danger of the present moment is that with the so-called Ukrainian crisis, the system of international relations has entered the stage when the old post-Yalta status quo doesn't work anymore, although a new status quo is only appearing in dim outlines. It is risky both to abandon the former status quo and to repose trust in unclear phenomena. Putin's nuclear blackmail makes the choice even more costly. Of course, it would be easier if Ukraine were ready to serve as a reliable and trusted alternative. But the trick is that it is difficult for Ukraine to transform itself while the West is imprisoned by fear and reluctance. And please don't underestimate the ability of Russia to undermine the hopes of the development of Ukraine. I do hope Edward Lucas' recent warning despair is wrong, and the West's heyday is not over. Lucas has said the West is losing. I quote, "We are not willing to take risks. We are not willing to use force. We are not willing to accept economic pain. We are not willing to deal with Kremlin information warfare. We are not yet willing to even accept that Russia is a revisionist power which wants to change the rules," unquote. Is there any way out of this deadlock? Yes, there is, and the key is values. Putin's regime is firmly tied to hatred, the lie, and violence. It is Ukrainian Maidans which were so outspoken in claiming freedom, goodness, and honesty. The world has to choose while recalling what Benjamin Franklin said over 250 years ago. I quote, "They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety," unquote. Is it possible that Europe, Ukraine included, has lost its ability to resonate or even risk, inspired by Franklin's principles, which are part of Europe's own core identity? Thank you.